With joint powers authorities as a new layer of regional government, how will you engage with state representatives? And this question goes out to Damon. Damon, can you please describe the top committees or the endeavors at state levels that would be your first few areas of top focus if you were to win this election?
Yes. Thank you, Jean. Good evening, everyone. I couldn't help but noticing I'm the only person in a suit and tie this evening. I did not get the memo.
I'm wearing a baggy suit.
First of all, just let me say, how long do we have for the answer?
1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute.
So we can time starting now. I'm sorry for not clarifying that.
Okay, thank you. The absolute priority committee that most directly impacts our local communities is the local government committee. Actually, Mark Levine, our state representative, is on that committee. My colleagues and I work closely with him. Housing committee is also a key one. We know with Plan Bay Area, other regional initiatives coming down at us at a local level, it's imperative that we stand up. It's what I've done locally. I led the charge against the priority development area here in Terra Linda with the Civic Center. I did not believe it made sense for our community. We need a range of housing, but high density did not make sense there. I think we actually need a vision for District 1 on how we want to develop. Part of that is going to be engaging relentlessly with regional and state officials.
Thank you very much, Damon. Okay, now you might think that I'm going to ask Susan the same question, but I'm not. Okay, we're going to go again to page 3, where number 1C, how do you and will you build consensus on the Board of Supervisors? So Susan, to you, how do you handle stronghold opposition on the board? We've heard about how you build consensus, but what happens if it just ain't flying?
I'm going to stand because I feel like I'm sitting at the kids' table at Thanksgiving here. There's many examples over the course of my time in office where I've demonstrated leadership and getting projects over the finish line. One example, the Santa Fe Rock Quarry, which was in a very difficult negotiation with their neighbors about how they were going to operate. There was a lot of support on our board to just allow the operation to continue. State courts said that they were a mineral of importance, and we were fighting an uphill battle. And I brought the community together with the quarry to broker a deal that resulted in 172 conditions of operation, where both sides came to the Board of Supervisors and said, this is a fair deal. It's not everything that we wanted, but it's going to work for us. And as a result, I had unanimous support. So I was able to shift my board from going from not supporting it to unanimous support. And leadership isn't just listening to what your community says, it's actually getting that third vote to get things over the finish line.
Thank you, Susan. The next question is on page 4 of your hymnal, number 1D. What are your plans to support what some feel is a need to rebuild trust in government and to install further transparency? Transparency, if you haven't noticed, is our buzzword of the decade. And it's something that we all seek here. Now, I think that Susan and Damon did a very good job in responding to this, but I still had a little something to ask them. Damon, what do you think is specific foundation for any thoughts that trust in government and transparency need rebuilding?
My sense right now is we're at a point where business as usual is not working. There was perhaps a time, I'll call it the old model, where we simply as voters elected representatives who then go off and make decisions with little input. That's not the case anymore. We live in a community that is more engaged than ever. Our elected officials need to be as well. I want to give you an example of a concrete step we're doing in Santa Fe. We've actually established a committee called Growing Resident Engagement and Transparency, the GREAT Committee, where we actually are going out, engaging the community proactively. We're using social media. We are looking at current practices and how we can improve them. We actually are we are basically committed through this committee to increasing transparency.
Damon, thank you. And Susan, when it comes to that exact same question, what are your plans to support what some things think is they need to rebuild trust and transparency in government? You're sitting there in county government, so what do you think is specific foundation for people even asking this question? Your thoughts that trust in government and transparency need rebuilding?
Well, over the last several months, probably more than a year, there have been a lot of very complicated land use issues that have come forward to us. Plan Bay Area, housing elements, specific plans. And there's been a lot of confusion about how they're the same, how they're different, and how they inform each other. But at our county, I launched audiovisual webcasting in our board chamber. So every single public meeting is archived, and you can go and watch any meeting with all the documents that you want, more than you even want, to learn what we're doing in the county. I've held not only large community meetings, but small house meetings. I go on community cleanup days. We pulled 8 tons of invasive species out of the Santa Venetia marsh and replaced it with native plants. And during that process, I was able to listen to my community about what the issues are around flood zone. Social media is something we're starting to use, but it's also a responsibility of our public to reach out to us when they have questions and find the responses that they need.
In all fairness to this question, moderator feels that no matter what government does, we are always going to ask government to continue to rebuild trust and increase transparency. It doesn't need to just be a buzzword, but I think we're always going to be looking to your leadership to do that. Transparency is a process, it is not an event. Okay, environment. Let's talk about the environment since we're on that topic. How can elected government influence the Marin Municipal Water District regarding water quantity and quality? When I read these responses, I get very educated. And I learned a lot by reading both of these responses. And Damon, if you're elected, what further involvement or outreach would you pursue in the way of water quantity and quality?
So thank you for the question. I assume everyone's read my response where we talk about advocating for vigorous conservation right now, which MMWD is pursuing. I believe the county and cities need to engage with that. I want to talk about a more unique program we're doing in the city that's very grassroots. It's part of what we're calling our community engagement strategy. We actually are partnering with MMWD to go out to congregations, train leaders on how to encourage members of their congregations to engage in greater water conservation and efficiency at home. It's part of a resilient neighborhood strategy we're doing in San Rafael. I think it's these grassroots efforts that are really going to get the most bang for our buck in water conservation, greenhouse gas reductions. I've been proud of being the chair of the Sustainability Committee in San Rafael, spearheading these kind of efforts. We can do more at the county level.
Thanks, David. And Susan, on that same topic in that area, what further work, if any, do you think needs to happen in the pursuit of water quality?
Well, the county actually had its first water forum, audiovisual webcast on our county web, where we were looking at not only the question about how do we make ourselves more drought resilient, but what is our water capacity in terms of land use and housing development? That's been a really big issue that the community has been asking us about. One of the things that I'm really proud of working on is a project called the Marin Carbon Project, and that's an agricultural issue. Our Board of Supervisors is responsible for agriculture, and I've been very engaged. The Marin Carbon Project is a way of sequestering carbon, taking carbon out of the atmosphere, retaining more fluid in the soils, and being able to provide longer-term forage for cattle. And 7% retention of water. When we went out to the test sites with the Bay Area Air Quality District, and I'm trying to get cap and trade funds to allow this to be spread all over West Marin, the 3 test ranches were the only ones with green grass before we had the big rains in January, February.
That's interesting. I have not heard of the Marin Carbon Project. Then again, I come here to get educated. Number 2B, please explain your understanding of watershed protection issues and your ideas on related funding solutions. I will throw in this caveat. My parents moved when I was a child from Bret Harte, Blue Street, because there was rain and we had to go to school in canoes. They moved to Santa Benicia thinking it would be flood-free. And that was in 1964. And being in Santa Benicia, I think the second word I learned in my vocabulary there was watershed. Let's see. Damon, you have responded here talking a little bit about your thoughts on the Galenas watershed. Can you please elaborate on your ideas for funding solutions overall tied to watershed protection issues?
Yeah, funding is always a key issue. I actually spearheaded the effort of the city to partner with the county in coming up with funding to do a watershed study of the Galenas watershed. It's a good first step. This is an issue I've been very concerned about. As many of you know, I weighed in heavily on the Santa Fe Airport soccer complex issue. I was particularly concerned about the project as it related to the Galenas watershed and potential impacts. And in fact, tried to come up with a compromise with the parties where we could actually preserve some additional wetlands that are currently diked baylands. I think those kind of proactive efforts are what we're going to need. Now funding, it's not going to only be local. If you're talking about projects of that magnitude, and we really are with sea level rise, it's state and federal funding as well. I'm committed to advocating for our communities at all levels for funding.
Thank you. And Susan, can you answer that similarly? Can you elaborate on your ideas for funding solutions tied to watershed protection?
Absolutely. Well, we had asked Santa Fe for an $80,000 partnership because all of the other partners were participating. We did get $20,000. But it was a $300,000 assessment. And for those of you that are interested in community service funds, $300,000 of District 1 funds actually went into helping to fund the watershed and levee studies. Currently, the county parks are working on environmental studies and assessments to see how we can take down outer levees and work on horizontal levees to improve the protection of the community using nature as a way to absorb the programs. And I've been to Washington, D.C. I actually was very successful in getting language changed in the Water Resources Development Act that would allow Santa Benicia to be able to get the funding that we needed to do $1 million worth of levee and watershed studies. So I was able to bring dollars home to that community. And now we're getting ready to look at what we can do to implement those programs.
Thank you very much. Okay, the community plan for Lucas Valley and Marinwood. This is one that's near and dear to my heart because when I used to run the Santa Benicia Neighborhood Association, it seemed like we were working on our community plan ideas and polling back then. And it's just now actually getting started as far as its development goes. So this is definitely a long haul kind of thing. So in number 3B, the question there is, what can be done to develop a community plan for Lucas Valley and Marinwood? So Damon, can you further explain beyond what you've written here, your understanding of the formal processes that would be engaged to develop this plan from at the county level?
Yes, first I have to just correct the record. We did not just put in 20,000, it's 60,000. Second of all, the $1 million that was spent for the studies in Santa Benicia merely concluded that the Army Corps of Engineers, the project doesn't even qualify for their program. So I think we do need to get our act together in Santa Benicia. Community plan is an opportunity for the local communities to come together, talk about land use, services. It's formalized through the county. Santa Benicia is doing that process now. We're long overdue to do it in Lucas Valley and Marinwood. I'm particularly concerned about the level of development being proposed in our area. 70% of the housing element for unincorporated areas is in District 1. I want to know what the overall vision is. I want to have community engagement on it. The local community plan is a formalized way for the community to weigh in on impacts on schools, etc.
Thanks, Damon. With regard to the Lucas Valley Marin Community Plan, Susan, how and what has the Board of Supervisors communicated in the way of any next step expectations for the development of this community plan?
Well, we have 30 different community plans, either planned, wanting to be planned or already old and outdated.
But for Lucas Valley Marin?
But for Lucas Valley, they'll be in the queue. We're going to do 2 every year. We started off with Santa Venetia and with Black Point because they had already done a lot of work up front with their watershed studies. And those $1 million worth of studies are actually helping us to direct what we're going to do with the watershed that's not wasted funds. And the community plans are important because it gives the opportunity for the communities to look at the things that are unique in their community that they want addressed that are outside of our general plan. We already have a really vibrant general plan that does ridge line protection, watershed setbacks, but there are some things like in the Lucas Valley community like Eichlers or certain kinds of programs that they like in terms of undergrounding overhead wiring. And so when we look at our general plan, it's what's unique about this. And the Marinwood and Lucas Valley community is starting to have some of those discussions now.
Okay. We're going to ask both of them to comment on this, and I just find this so interesting that we tend to address the same issues. A few of the variables are out there, but the one on how we have all of these school district sites that are owned by the school district, because there used to be a lot of us kids going to these places, and for whatever reason, they're shut down, they are unpopulated, they are in states of disrepair, and there's continued conversation about rezoning for affordable housing. We had this happen in Santa Venetia with the McPhail School, and I remember that conversation from about 11 years ago. Damon, you've definitely responded here regarding the Lucas Valley School, which is now the site of Marin Waldorf. But can you please comment on other District 1 public school sites that are being talked about for affordable housing?
Yes, thank you. A critical issue, and I have some personal experience with it. I don't know, as many of you may know, I was actually the president of the Dixie School Board before now in my second term on the City Council. Let me give you some statistics on where we're at in terms of capacity in our school system right now. This is even without any new development that we're talking about. The Dixie School is now at 93% capacity, Mary Silvera 92, Vallecito 89, Miller Creek 84%. By 2016-17, the Dixie School District facilities will be filled to capacity. We need our facilities. Secondly, going back to the local community plan, what is the overall vision in terms of where we're going to put housing? Right now, the county is proposing to concentrate it in certain areas in District 1. I don't see a plan on how that relates to potential school sites. Right now, I think we have to take care of business, and that is making sure we have the facilities for school.
Thank you very much, Damon. For those who were not familiar, it was something that I actually felt that I needed to research. Who here is familiar with what basic aid funding is within the school system? Okay, it is halfway commonplace knowledge here. I'm going to go ahead and define what that is before Susan answers the question she doesn't know I'm going to ask her yet. What is it? I'm going to come back to that, but I want to, it occurred to me that not everybody knows what basic aid is, and I was right. Basic aid, also known as local funding, essentially occurs when the local property tax revenue in a district exceeds the total general purpose funding that the state would have provided. In other words, there's no need to factor in any state aid because the property taxes alone surpass what the minimum funding level would be from the state. And what is done by the state is driven by enrollments. This does not have any impact on taxpayers or specific programs, but it does change the way that dollars are routed and flow as well as the amount. By definition, basic aid districts receive funding above and beyond their calculated revenue limit. The upside to basic aid is that a district can receive funding in excess of its state calculated revenue limit because it's in an area with higher property taxes. And the growing property taxes generally translate into more revenue. So if I've now completely confused anyone, please see me at the break. But now, Susan, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to please comment on that. But the question for you is a little bit different than the one that was asked of Damon because of your response. Can you please comment on specific District 1 public school sites that are being talked about for affordable housing zoning?
None. The school districts have complete responsibility over their sites, and as you heard Damon talk about, there's going to be some capacity issues. If something comes available in our community, in the District 1, Santa Venetia is very interested in turning the McPhail site into a community center and public park area, and there are community members that are interested, including the community members that just helped us to purchase and protect Heron Hill. And so if that becomes an opportunity, that would be the direction we're going. Damon isn't saying where he would put the housing that's mandated in our housing element in unincorporated Marin. He's just saying no. And there's a misconception that everything's going into Santa Fe, well, into our district. Well, housing element says we're obligated to find 185 units a site. We already have the zoning in our area, St. Vincent Silvera, which Santa Fe was going to put 2,100 units of housing on. Now there's a cap of 221. 185 units falls within that 221 zoning. So it's going to be something that's on the table, and it'll be important for all of you to show up to the workshop to weigh in and say, if not there, then where?
Thank you. I found this an interesting question, number 4A, that the community came up with. And I followed it here and there. And the question was, are big box stores such as Target, Home Depot, Costco, good for Marin and why? And both Susan and Damon expressed their thoughts on this. I thought that these were, they did answer the question. But I'd like to know, you guys, and this is a short one, you probably don't need a timer for this. Do you or members of your household, Damon, shop at any of those big box stores? Huh?
Walmart.
We have been to Home Depot and Costco. My big push, as many of you know, is on the Target big box superstore in East Santa Fe. My colleague at the time, Greg Brockbank, and I studied that extensively, and I came to the conclusion that the project did not make sense for our community. We were actually being asked to override existing zoning for light industrial to install this. I didn't feel we were getting adequate answers on benefit levels. There was a 50% differential between wages paid by Target and our local grocery workers. So it was a downward pressure on wages. The local business community weighed in as well. We have the store now. We made some improvements through a legal settlement. So I still have my reservations, but we'll see how it plays out.
Susan, same question for you.
I haven't been to the Target in San Rafael yet. I have gone to Best Buy for some electronic equipment. I'm not a Costco member. But in terms of big box, mostly those big box retailers are not engaged in philanthropy to the level that our local businesses are. And I do try to support our local businesses. I brought a market into our derelict strip mall at Marinwood Village as a phase 1 for what the community had said they wanted. They're very happy with that grocery store. I brought in a farmer's market. And the other problem with the big box stores is that they don't pay adequate salaries and benefits, and sometimes are directing their employees how to get to the county social services office to sign up for Medicaid and food stamps and all of the other social services. So we are subsidizing in our tax dollars the profits that the big box stores are generating. And if they start providing benefits and they start providing a living wage, I would have no problem with them.
Thank you. We're going to actually go out of order here now. Number 4D, what are the cost-benefit outcomes of having moved Marin's public health lab services to be regionalized outside of the county, which was to have saved Marin County upwards of $400,000 per year. That's a lot of change. So Damon, some disaster preparedness awareness programs explain that in times of natural disaster, we can expect to be in more reactive, less control mode versus proactive mode, and that infrastructure will fall by the wayside, at least for a few days. In your response here, you talked about your concern of laboratory testing response time during those times of major disaster. Could you please talk a little bit more about that level of concern?
Yeah, and this is really an issue I've tried to educate myself on over the past year or so, and I've specifically relied on discussions with staff at the county who are engaged in providing healthcare services, who raised concerns both about the effect of moving the lab, but also the process that led up to the lab and whether there was adequate input by professionals in making the decision. The second thing, of course, is community concern about it, which I've heard greatly, including by some of whom are in the room and certainly in our area. Ultimately, it comes down to being disaster ready. To a county like Marin, unless there's some inherent overriding cost need or other operational need to move it, we should have a health lab here in county.
Thanks, David. And Susan, on that same topic, but not the exact question, year over year, how are the anticipated versus actual levels of the $400,000 savings per year tracking with the services relocation? And also, what are the disadvantages and or the negative impacts to moving these services outside of Marin?
Well, we have realized close to the projections that we were anticipating. We just had our one-year report from our public health director. One of the biggest concerns was how long it would take to get water samples there for studying. There was not one missed water sample. All water samples were done. And what joining the regional lab did for us was allow us the opportunity to some really high-end technology that we would not have been able to afford here in Marin County in a building that was not earthquake safe, that needed retrofitting. I'm the chair of the Disaster Council. We took a whole year to study this issue and to make sure that we would have everything in place. But regionalization of public health analysis makes sense. If we have a pandemic, and I'm a nurse, I'm a professor of nursing, if we have a pandemic flu or anthrax or terrorist outbreak, it doesn't just stop at the Marin County border. This is something that will travel around over our borders, and it really pays to have all of the great minds from all of our counties working collectively on how to address those types of issues.
Thank you. I'm going to go back now to question 4B. Was after I gave that description of basic aid for education, I'd like for each Damon, you first, and Susan to comment, explain your understanding of the basic aid funding for public ed and your perspective on same, please.
Basic aid is the best funding formula you can have as a school district. What it means is your local community generates enough property tax revenue that the state literally just gives you a basic amount above that. So it's stable going forward as a source of funding. The alternative is funding by average daily attendance. This issue really came to a head in Marinwood with the proposed development. I was at the meeting where residents raised a concern. We're a basic aid district. You're not giving us complete answers on how many kids would be generated by this project and what the impact would be on funding. I've heard some suggest that Dixie is getting out of basic aid. It's speculative. It's moved in and out over time. The idea that somehow it's a positive or a way of supporting a project, that it may not be basic aid, it's not a good thing. So we have to come up with a solution of how would we even fund the proposed development. I have heard no straight answers.
Thanks, Damon. And Susan, can you speak to the same? Shall I repeat the question you've got?
Certainly. We passed Prop 30, the governor's proposition, which actually increases the amount of revenue coming to schools. And our chief financial officer at the county did an analysis and projects that regardless of whether or not Marinwood is developed, that over the next 3 years, it's likely that once again, Dixie will convert back to a basic aid school. So the issue about whether or not a nonprofit housing development is going to put stress is an important issue. I agree with Damon on that. And our county has done a lot to partner with the schools to help them. Some of the community service grants we've allocated have gone to after-school programs and computer labs. We did a fundraiser at our fair. The first day raised $400,000 for the school's rules program. And so the issue about the Dixie School, if it becomes underfunded, I'm working with the Marin Community Foundation and the county to create a line item trust that Dixie can draw down from if that project actually is developed to help offset the $90,000 a year, that's again our Director of Finance's estimate, that might be not collected for the school district.
Thank you, Susan. And I hope as you're hearing these answers, if you do not feel that you heard a complete answer, feel free to write them down on the cards, raise your hand, and a runner will bring up a purple card to Jean. Then Jean decides what category it's in and who to ask. We're going to go to question number 4E, which is on page 16. Please describe how you have or will handle unfunded mandates at the county level. I remember when the government in 1991 said that all businesses had to pay their taxes electronically. What the government forgot to check on was to make sure that all of Business America had a computer and the internet. And the government had to retract that. So I think we do see many cases where lawmakers will make laws and people are unable to afford it. They look to the localities to fund that. So I thought this was just a really good question. Damon, when we're talking to mandates, what's your understanding if the county just doesn't appear to be able to afford something to fulfill on a mandate? What happens up there at the Civic Center?
This is another area where it's important that we exert our influence, both individually as a county and collectively with other counties or the cities, as may be the case, to challenge the unfunded mandates. It's a chronic problem coming out of Washington and Sacramento. The way we deal with it at the city level is we band together as all Marin cities through an organization, and we actually fight for issues around local finance, local control, and unfunded mandates. There's a similar body that the county is engaged with, the California State Association of Counties, where we have to exert similar influence. There's no getting around it. We have to fight back against unfunded mandates. It simply is not sustainable to have programs where we don't have the money. Thank you,
David. Susan, what happens if the county doesn't have the money to fund even the least costly mandated base program?
Well, at least in my next term, I don't foresee that happening. Our county is in excellent financial shape. We are one of only 2 counties in the state of California that has a structural balance, a AAA Fitch and Moody rating. We have a very low debt, we have a very healthy reserve, and we're taking care of all of our business. I serve on the executive committee of the California State Association of Counties. I will be there tomorrow trying to salvage AB 1537 from defeat, which will lower our densities here in Marin County. And as a result of being there on a leadership capacity at the State Association, I've been able to bring the Marin perspective to a very challenging state. The Central Valley is a lot different from Southern California and from the north. But together, we put together Prop 1A, which said the state government can no longer pass a law that puts unfunded mandates to that. And we're dogging that. And we're meeting with the governor regularly when his ideas are coming up where he wants to try to shift those costs to us.
Thanks, Susan. And here is what I call a wild card. I didn't even know this was coming. Damon, where do you stand on any possible revision of Proposition 13?
I firmly believe in keeping the protections of Prop 13 in place for residential homeowners. We know that it's important, particularly with seniors. If it was assessed at the actual value, a lot of people would be driven out of their homes. I am intrigued by some other possible reforms to Proposition 13. One would be on the commercial property side. There's actually a situation now, because the system can be gamed, that you might have an assessment of, let's say, the Disney Corp, for example, that goes all the way back to the late 70s. You also have situations where there's stock transfers, and they can structure it in a way where the property tax level doesn't change. So I think we need to revisit what's called a split roll. In terms of the Proposition 13 limit on local tax measures, which is 2/3, in some cases it may make sense to look at like a 55% for local needs.
And Susan, can you please comment, where do you stand on any possible revision of Prop 13?
Well, I have to agree with what Damon said.
We have history here.
You know, Damon and I have been friends for a long time, and we've had a lot of coffee chats at the North Gate Bagel Shop, and I think this is one of the areas where I don't think you're going to find any difference at all. I think lowering the supermajority from a 2/3 majority down a little bit lower, and then looking at, you have to have a 2/3 majority for a specific tax, which doesn't make sense because you only need a simple majority for a general tax. And the general tax doesn't give the voters any opportunity to know what are they going to spend the money on. You were very crafty in the way you did the successful assessment to help with the fire services. And I think we need to look at how do we, in the local level, be able to have the voice of our community, and perhaps not a simple majority, but 2/3 is really challenging. And, you know, in my view, a democracy means the majority rules.
Thank you, Susan. We have several cards come up here on planning and housing, so we're going to continue talking about that type of thing. And this question will go to both of you. David, will subsidized housing be required and built in Ross, Mill Valley, Belvedere, and Tiburon to the best of your knowledge? These are on-the-spot questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. But what I'd like to focus on is District 1, though. And again, everyone recognizes, I don't come across a single person in our district that does not recognize that we need a range of housing options in the community. The issue is high-density housing the solution? I happen to agree with Supervisor Adams back in 2002 when she ran on a no development platform for St. Vincent Silvera. I still happen to agree with that position, but we now find ourselves in a situation where not only is housing being proposed there, but also Marinwood, Grady Ranch. We haven't even talked about Oakview Manor. The numbers are astounding, and they don't make sense for our community in terms of why people move here, what our local needs are. There's other solutions. We can look at restoration, renovations, second units. If there is small development, let's do inclusionary zoning. We could talk forever on alternatives.
Thank you. Susan, do you want to comment on that, on the Ross, Mill Valley, Belvedere, Tiburon?
Sure. Well, they have their own elected people, so I'm going to let them worry about that. We just saw what City Council in Corte Madera did with the Wind Cup, and that was all Corte Madera City Council and their process. The county nor ABAG had nothing to do with that. But if you drive up the 101 corridor, you will see multiple 3- to 5-story multi-unit family units along the 101 corridor. Because back in 1972, the county made the decision that the urbanized development was going to happen along the 101 corridor so we could protect the 80% of our state parks, national parks, and county protected lands for agriculture, and those would not be developed as we focused on the areas where communities were. The zoning that's in our general plan determines it, and certainly through a public process we can change that zoning, but it's really difficult. Our general plan dictates it, and as I said, in San Rafael, they had a general plan that originally looked at perhaps 2,100 units of housing in St. Vincent Silvera, and that doesn't happen, because just because there's a plan doesn't mean it gets built. There's process that happens.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read two of these because I think that your responses, and Damon, you can go first, will be interweaved, if not already. The first one was, in your opinion, what is an acceptable percentage of low-cost affordable housing in each development PDA, the planned development area? And what is your opinion of the PDA in central San Rafael with the rebuilding of Whistle Stop, including senior housing?
So it's almost two separate questions. One goes to PDA, another goes to what level of affordable housing percentage makes sense in our community. Again, as I briefly mentioned earlier, I decided, and I have to compliment Mayor Gary Phillips, who's here this evening as well, for showing leadership on the issue. With an intense amount of community engagement, town hall meetings, we decided to rescind the PDA in the Civic Center. That having been said, we came up with a good stationary plan that calls for some development, some mixed use, bicycle and ped circulation. Currently, we still have a PDA designation in central San Rafael. It's more consistent with zoning. That having been said, we're also in intense engagement with our neighborhoods. I think Whistle Stop is a potential site for senior housing. We're going to have to see more of the details. Senior housing is definitely something we need in our community.
Thanks, Damon. And Susan, shall I repeat the questions? Or
No, I can do this for a minute. I think the original station area plan for the Civic Center was passed unanimously, from what I recall, from the City Council, the original one. There was a lot of community input that went into this. I had raised some questions about putting housing on the Christmas tree lot, which we're actually going to do a farmer's market on now, which we're all celebrating between the city and the county. And we don't have any multifamily low-income units that we've built in unincorporated Marin since I've been in office. But there is a 4-story multifamily unit right across from the Civic Center that has 88 units that ran into some challenges. And there was a lot of community protest from the unincorporated part of the community about that project, and it went through anyway. The rents are pretty expensive. So we're talking about trying to find housing for families that are earning less than $65,000 a year, and our starting teachers start at $45,000. So how can they afford some of these high-end units that have been built?
Thank you, Susan. There is a question here on those who are unhoused. It's a planning question. Damon, do you think that the whole of Marin County should be involved and be responsible for the cost of caring for the homeless, including paying for the guard who is receiving $60,000 a year at the San Rafael Library? This person has some intelligence. So your comments on that, sir?
Yeah, just a quick response to a couple things. I, early on with the community, raised concerns about the Civic Center plan in 2011. Later on, I was able to swing my colleagues, again with Mayor Phillips' help, to get the plan changed. Secondly, I voted against the project Supervisor Adams is talking about, as she knows. Homelessness is a complex, huge issue for our community. We're working extensively on it in San Rafael. A lot of innovative programs like the Downtown Streets team. Participants in that work to clean up the streets. 12 of the participants have already landed full-time jobs. We've got a mental health officer. That having been said, it is a countywide issue demanding countywide solutions. $46 million county budget just for mental health. I want to get in there and do a fresh perspective on it. Are we spending the money as well as we can? Chronic inebriation is a huge part of the issue. The Helen Vine Center may close. We need alternatives to that. And finally, we need to figure out location for a shelter.
Thank you. Susan.
Thank you. Well, the $46 million isn't all just, fast money that we get to spend. The vast majority of that has really strict requirements from the state and federal government, and it goes to Medicaid, expanded family services like WIC or TANF. The county is spending, though, $14 million a year on services. We fully fund the Mill Street program because the Homeward Bound wasn't able to continue doing that, so we took that up because we didn't want those 55 people on the street. I went to Washington, D.C. and lobbied for 35 Section 8 vouchers for homeless veterans. They're called VASH vouchers, the only vouchers that aren't sequestered with the federal budget. And we housed, in the last 2 years, 35 individuals. 10 of them have moved on, which opened up those vouchers for the next 10. We're committed to this. This is a countywide, this is a country issue. We're just coming out of the worst recession we've ever come out of. We have moms living in cars in our county with their kids. But our one-day counts that we've done, 5 years ago, 1,900 homeless, last year, 900. So the programs that we're putting in place are making a difference.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, here is one that is not about housing. This was on the environment. Given the recent UN climate change report and current state mandate to decrease our carbon levels, how would you utilize the Marin Carbon Project to reach our goals? And then there's a second part to the question. Also, how do you see the Marin Carbon Project can also be instrumental in tackling the invasive weed problem for our important organic ranchers? This is a land management, not an acid spray solution. Damon.
As was previously mentioned, carbon sequestration is definitely part of the overall strategy to combat climate change. I'm intrigued by this program. I want to learn more about it. But really, we also have to reduce our carbon emissions. I think this is one area where the county can do better. In San Rafael, we have a vigorous climate change action plan. We were the first city in the county to adopt it. I've been a leader on that. We're not only looking at programs like increasing renewable energy in the city, we actually are leading a 3-county effort to bring more solar energy onto public buildings. We were the first city to install electric vehicle charging stations. We need to do more of that. We're considering, in fact, we'll go deep green on Marin Clean Energy. We actually also are looking at some innovative ideas on restructuring rates for Marin Sanitary Service to get to our zero waste goals.
Thank you, David. Yes.
Well, I'm really proud of the Marin Carbon Project, and I serve in a leadership position on the Climate Change Committee for the Bay Area Air Quality District. And working with the regulator, I brought them out to the ranches and they got very excited. So we're working on regulations which aren't currently in place in state legislation and regulation to allow cap and trade funds from the oil refineries that need to find a place to invest in other clean programs. And we're working on those regulations now. And it will help our small family farmers too to stay in business. We have a farming heritage here. They were the original environmental stewards of our land. I was the deciding vote for the Marin Clean Energy. I'm really proud of that. I know Damon is just as passionate about clean energy as I am. And we are at the county putting a 0.5 megawatt solar facility on top of our new public safety building. And if any of you want to come to that ribbon cutting, it's happening in May. But it was a reuse of a building and we put solar on top and it's going to be mostly generating its own energy.
Thanks, Susan. What do you consider to be the most critical issues facing District 1 in the county? And if you could please state these, let's say the top 3 to 5, Damon, in order of priority.
Sure. I'm doing a lot of door-to-door, which I really feel is the best way to learn what's on people's minds. I would say right now the big issue in District 1 are concerns about development and housing. The reason in particular it's of concern is it affects so many other issues of priority. One is the fiscal health of our schools and our school facilities, as was discussed earlier. Transportation fits into that as well. If you look at a project like the Wind Cup, despite the fact that theoretically it's designed to link up with transit, it looks to me like a traffic buster. People are concerned about those kind of projects and how do we move forward in terms of transportation solutions. The fiscal health of the county is a very concern to me and the public. Supervisor Adams referred to the bond rating. The fact is the county has $104 million in pension obligation bonds and is ranked very low by the county grand jury on retiree health care unfunded liability. We've got to improve it.
Thanks, Damon. And Susan, same question in order of priority.
Well, land use certainly is one issue. That's always the big issue. That's how I was elected in my first race around the St. Vincent Silvera issues. The fiscal health of the county is certainly an issue, and even though we took out a bond to help fund the corpus, we're 78% funded in the corpus in our retirement system, which gave us our great credit rating. And even with that bond, we still have very, very low debt service for our county. We have a lot of capacity, and we have a very healthy reserve. We just paid down $50 million to our pension obligations, including pensions and retiree health. And one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. This is huge, and I'm a professor of nursing, so I'm helping to bring the county through how do we make sure that we're implementing the most seminal law that's ever happened in healthcare since Medicare. And we've done really well. Actually, Marin County has received top ratings in the state, and California is one of the best in terms of helping to get more people enrolled in our healthcare programs.
Thank you. Another question that we have is actually a couple of them all tied to low-cost, affordable housing, which is top of mind, obviously, tonight. One of the questions is everybody keeps talking about the horror of affordable housing plan development and wondering when did the last development actually take place. The second question is if anyone sees or perceives that there is some thinly veiled racism in the opposition to low-cost housing, and wondering if the poor are to be feared. So, Damon, would you like to take that one?
The poor are not to be feared. They're a part of our community. One thing I'd love to see is more of an emphasis on living wages and raising the minimum wage. Why don't we see what we can do about rising people up so they can more able to afford to live in our community. I think overall we're a community of goodwill. And again, I've heard no one, at least to my face, say they're opposed to a range of housing opportunities for our community. We were proud in San Rafael to go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of Contempo Marin to fight for rent control. And we won against a large out-of-state corporation. That's simply one solution. I referred to some others earlier. Marin is a creative place. What I find is oftentimes when we put our minds to it and lead, other communities follow. I'm convinced working together, we can come up with some solutions that make sense for our communities for affordable housing beyond high density next to the freeway.
Thanks, Damon. Susan, shall I read these again? Or
No, I've got it. So the county recently completed a senior affordable housing program, about 50 units for very low-income seniors in Novato. The Fireside, which is down in Manzanita, so we are spreading it out around our unincorporated areas, not just dumping it all into Marinwood. Those are 50 units for seniors and low-income and people that have some pretty serious disabilities. And for a long time, we've had the Rotary Village in Lucas Valley. That's 80 units of very, very low-income housing for very low-income seniors. So when we're talking about affordable housing in Marin County, I want to put it in context. Affordable in Marin County means about 60 to 80% for low income of the median income. So in Marin County, those are families of four earning $65,000 a year or less. Those are my kids. Those are our teachers. Those are our in-home support service workers making $12.10 an hour. People who are part of the fabric of our community that have to commute and clog up our 101, which everybody complains about, coming from Santa Rosa and Vallejo and Richmond to do the services that we need here.
Thanks, Susan. And thank you for the person who wrote this question out just now, again on housing. Since 40% of state cities and counties do not have a certified housing element, why not take the stand and just say no to state government, which this person feels has gotten out of control and is only responding to developers and to Wall Street? Damon?
Centerville did get its housing element certified in 2011. I guess what I would say is I agree with the spirit of the questioner's premise. There's a disconnect there. We see situations now where we're getting these dictates from ABAG and MTC and the regional agencies that bear little resemblance or semblance to what we need as communities. Again, going back to the planned Bay Area debate, I will note that Supervisor Adams was the vice president of ABAG while these plans were being developed. It got to the point where at the end of the debate on the Civic Center, we received a veiled threat from one of the regional agencies. If you vote to rescind, you will lose money in connection with the Civic Center Drive improvements. We ultimately concluded there was not a sufficient guarantee we would either gain or lose money by rescinding, so we did. Guess what? The money materialized anyway.
Susan, would you like me to reread?
No, I got it. Well, it's not ABAG that's dictating these housing numbers, it's the state. And the state sends out their dictate to the 14 councils of government, or COGs, that are in the state of California. And ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, is one of those. And yes, I did serve on ABAG. And when I was first on ABAG, there was a vote made, and I was the only no vote that said unincorporated Marin was supposed to get 773 units. After I built some relationships on ABAG, this last cycle that I did vote on, we were able to lower that to 185 units. So I think I was really effective in saying in unincorporated Marin, that's not the place to put high density housing. So the other issue is that you can say no, and you can drop the ball on it, and the state will say you're out of compliance. But what happens is that different legal groups will come after you if you're not in compliance too with your housing element and sue you, like what happened in Corte Madera, and they ended up having to create a housing development, and they couldn't issue one more permit for any other modification on any building until they created that. So, we're kind of in a jam if we don't comply.
Thank you, Susan. That actually brings us to closing statements. And unless any of you out there raise your hands and tell me that you're writing additional questions, well, you have a question, okay? I will come and get them. Because I have this fancy mouthpiece on, I can have it while I'm walking.
This is actually a correction to the statement.
Okay.
Supervisor.
Okay, there is a statement here. It says, RBSB corrections.
Rotary Valley Village.
Rotary Valley Village, thank you. 20% are very low income. 20% are low income. 20% are low to modest.
Low to moderate, yeah.
Moderate, and 20% are moderate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's correct,
Okay, so the point there was, thank you very much.
They're not all very, very low. I think that's a misunderstanding.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Are there any additional questions? Show of hands. All righty, I have no idea what. Yes? Did you have it written down?
I'm writing it.
Thank you. We'll wait for that then. While you're writing that, I'll sing a few. There's excellent leadership here with Damon and with Susan, and they have crafted what I believe are some very thoughtful responses to some tough questions. And there are clearly some things that get decisioned by those who are in positions of leadership that are not always agreed upon. Some of them they do agree upon. But we do trust our leaders, and we hope that they're listening and not only doing their best, but challenging all around them to do their best, and that's all we can hope for in our leadership in this democracy. The questions that arose tonight, some of them were new, many of them were on the spot. I was very delighted to see that there were this many questions, and I did ask all of them, except for the one that is being brought up to me now. Okay, Susan, do you support planned Bay Area?
What I don't support was the process that they used to have the conversation about how do we grow as a Bay Area region. We don't have a gate around Marin County, and we have some pretty congested areas, and we have limited transportation dollars to deal with our infrastructure. So the conversation came about as a result of the agencies that have the funding saying, we have limited dollars, how are we going to invest those into those areas where we can get the most bang for the buck? It's a good question to ask. The problem was, and what I had asked them to do was to start organically, to let the communities start weighing in from the beginning of those discussions, and that didn't happen. So that's my criticism of it. But I do think that we need to look at how do we commute, our workforce, our housing, where's the most appropriate place, because we're gonna have more people coming, and they're not coming from outside, they're coming out of our bodies. We're making these new people that are coming into our community, and I know that all my kids can't afford to live here in the community, so these are really important conversations.
I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and now we're going to have closing statements, first by Damon Connolly. I've asked our timer to please limit these to 120 seconds. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for coming out this evening. And let me just say what an honor it really has been to represent the community as a city council member. I live nearby on Las Colinas Avenue. My wife, Dawn, is a San Rafael native who graduated from Taylor Linda High. We've raised our 2 daughters here and have lived here for the past 18 years and realize what a great place we have here. Certainly put a lot of thought into the decision to run against an incumbent of 12 years. For me, it came down to a lot of community discussion, looking within myself, making a decision of, am I the right person to step up and do this job? What I've heard from the community is we're ready for a change. We need a supervisor who listens, puts the needs of residents first, and provides more effective leadership. Someone who brings people together. I feel I have those skills to do that, starting with the fact that I'm actually a professional mediator as well as an attorney. But for me, it gets back to core principles. What makes Marin unique? Why do people move here? And as we know, once they do, they never leave. I can confirm that walking door to door as well. And it's the local values. A fierce desire to protect the environment. Belief in keeping exceptional, strong public schools. Effective, efficient services, and low impact development. We live in a great place, but there really is a sense that decisions are being made right now without those local values in mind. You'll notice my platform slogan on my door hanger over there is keeping the promise of Marin. What it means is decision-making based on local values, informed by collaborative, community-based discussions, resulting in responsive, effective leadership and government at the local level. I'd appreciate your support.
Thank you very much, Damon. And Susan.
I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it's spring week, and I care deeply about my community. I've raised my children here. I've lived here more than 25 years. My kids went to the Dixie School District. I've been a big supporter. I'm a nurse, and I brought babies into the world. But I didn't just deliver babies, I've delivered the goods for this community. And just to talk about some of the things, the Health and Wellness Campus, using tobacco settlement money, not taxpayer dollars, protecting environmentally sensitive lands, like St. Vincent Silvera and most recently Heron Hill and Santa Venetia. I was the deciding vote that launched clean energy, and that was a tough one because I got a lot of political heat for that. I brokered the deal between the San Rafael Rock Quarry and their community so that the business is still operating in the neighborhood and there's been relative peace for 3 years. I created a nationally recognized medical reserve corps that will be ready to respond in the event of a disaster. And I also created a nationally recognized therapeutic justice program, which is diverting almost 200 nonviolent mentally ill offenders into treatment instead of jail with services. They're employed, they're getting the psychiatric services that they need, they're housed, and we've reduced the recidivism by more than 80%, and psych emergency visits by 55%. And we're one of the few jails in the state of California that actually has empty jail beds. Don't tell the governor about that. We're also paving roads. We're creating bike and pedestrian pathways. We have a structurally balanced budget with an excellent credit rating. We're paying down our pension obligations. My list is even longer than that. You can go to my website and see it. But I'm working day and night for you, and I serve on key positions in Sacramento. There's more work ahead. We're in a great community. And I bring experience and leadership, not just campaign slogans and promises. And I've delivered the goods, and I hope you'll support me again for one more tour of duty. Thank you.